Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the 145 panel. Delighted to have you here. Just to make sure you're in the right place, this is the Human Connections Conference Key Populations panel. And welcome to everyone who's participating. My name is James Hughes. I am the executive director of this organization called the Old Brewery Mission. I'm based here in Montreal, Quebec. You can see out my window, this is right at the corner of Saint Laurent and Saint Antoine Streets, where our main offices are. Our organization supports homeless men and women, trans people, and every other Montrealer in need who finds himself without a home. And what we found in our work here, as is the case right across the country, is that homeless people, while they've lost housing, certainly, they've lost income almost certainly. They almost never show up at our doors if they haven't also lost human connection. They've lost the social capital, the social connections that support all of us. And this is the kind of challenge that we see right on the street, right on the front line every day is to how to reconnect the people that we serve to old and new communities so that they can start to rebuild their lives. So this is why I'm so invested in this issue. I'm so grateful for the invitation to moderate this panel, which is composed of some absolutely fabulous people who you're going to meet in just a minute. They are each going to offer you, all four of them, an 8-minute video. The format is 8-minute videos consecutively, one after the other, and you're going to learn a ton. You're going to be inspired a ton. As well through these videos. Je suis super fier de qu'est-ce que va être livré dans les prochaines minutes. And so that will be followed by a question and answer period. And so really looking forward to what your impressions are and what your questions are with respect to this key populations panel. And so without further ado, let's get right to the videos. Mireille, over to you to cue those fabulous videos up for us. See you soon, everyone.
Hi, my name's Phil McAuliffe. I'm based in Canberra, Australia's capital city, and am coming to you from the traditional lands of the Ngunnawal people. I want to acknowledge Ngunnawal elders, past, present, and emerging, as the traditional custodians of the land upon which I live, work, and raise my family. I also extend my greetings and respect to all First Nations peoples here. What an honour it is to be here for the 2022 Canadian Human Connection Conference. Thank you to all involved for having me here. I work across 2 websites devoted to loneliness and supporting those experiencing loneliness. The sites are The Lonely Diplomat and thelonelinessguy.com. At The Loneliness Guy, I aim to do 2 things. The first is to destigmatize gay loneliness by saying the word loneliness as often as possible. And the second is to guide gay men experiencing loneliness to get this type of what I call the soul-nourishing connection that they need and deserve. I'm here today to talk about the courage it takes to come out as gay and as lonely, and to disrupt how gay loneliness is approached as a topic. I'm a human who's had the experience of coming out of the closet as gay and of coming out as someone experiencing loneliness. In my experience, I'm here to say that the stigma of being lonely outweighs the stigma of being gay. In my experience, coming out in any sense requires courage. It requires courage to continually come out of the closet in a heteronormative society. It requires courage to state that we experience loneliness in a society that values endless productivity and eternal positivity. Courage is required to disrupt and challenge these ongoing societal narratives, knowing that the key to feeling connected and feeling that we belong involves allowing what is within us to be seen and heard, even when it is challenging and society does not yet have the words to respond. What do I mean by this? Well, when I come out as gay, which, as I've just said, is never a one-time thing, I'm almost always met with acceptance and kindness. People respond with statements like, "That's awesome, yay you, well done." But when I come out as lonely, which I do all the time through my work at the Loneliness Guy, I'm often met with statements that indicate that the other person really doesn't know how to respond, and that they don't yet have the tried and trusted cliches to fall back on as their response. So I'm met with pity. "Oh, you poor thing," they say. Or sometimes someone tells me how to fix it, or tells me that I couldn't possibly be lonely because of how they perceive my life to be. The last thing I want is pity, and the second last thing that I want is for someone to rush in and try and fix it. Rationally understand all of this. We can show love for each other and to each other by taking away everything that causes pain. But what I've learned and experienced is that coming out as lonely holds an uncomfortable mirror up to the person with whom I'm speaking and have shared part of myself and my human experience. For a moment, they're forced to consider that they too could be lonely, or at least not have amazing quality connections, and this can make them feel very uncomfortable. They simply don't know how to respond, and rather than saying something that helps us both feel seen and heard, platitudes fill the void. I'm here to help with that moment of awkwardness and to help us all show up for each other in a kind and supportive, indeed a connective way. I'm here to help gay men, indeed all humans, feel seen and feel heard so we all feel that we belong. I'm here to disrupt and shake things up. I was going to say something else, but I'm in polite company. I'm here to help us all get uncomfortable in a way that helps and supports us all, wherever we are in the world, to show up in a human way to support ourselves and other humans. And that disruption starts through creating awareness. Disruption starts by stating that we're all allowed to be human and to experience and own our uncomfortable human emotions. Disruption is not rushing in to fix the problem of loneliness, but to first hold space for the problem and allow it to be. I'm here to build upon the uncomfortable lesson we've all had about loneliness that we received during the pandemic, reconstructing perceptions of community of connection in the gay community and all communities comes firstly from allowing our loneliness to exist. Allowing a loneliness to exist in a society that prizes productivity and endless positivity takes courage. And allowing your loneliness to exist also takes courage. My work at the Loneliness Guy is all about how we need to allow ourselves to be connected to our beautifully weird and authentic selves and have the courage to be who we are in the world. The connection we seek from those most important to us and to our communities is even more satisfying when we're unashamedly our beautifully weird and authentic selves. But living like this is terrifying and exciting all at once. As a proud gay man and as a proud human who experiences loneliness, I'm here to help others come out of their closet and receive meaningful support. And without doubt, that support will come in the form of mental health services for some. However, to respond to an issue of loneliness globally, I contend that we need to empower our communities to sit with each other's loneliness stories, helping us all feel seen and feel heard, to feel that we belong. I'm really here for that. Finally, I want to say this. I know that you choosing to come out publicly as a human experience loneliness is tough, even for those of you who work in loneliness-related issues as an academic or a public policy expert. I also know that your courage in sharing your experience of loneliness and allowing it to be will help others around you to do the same. We can shape how we accept our own loneliness and that of others when we and others come out as lonely. And I'm certainly here for that. Thank you so much to you all for your time today. I'm deeply grateful and humbled by the opportunity to speak with you and to hear some other amazing speakers. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Welcome to Intersectionality, Understanding Human Connection, presented by Elaine Butler, founder of Accessible Creates. So what is intersectionality? It is the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender. I'll talk about more in a second. As they apply to any given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and independent systems of discrimination and disadvantage. It is also the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people. Some examples include mental health, gender identity, gender expression, appearance, your age, your personality, your culture. So what is your cultural background? What is your nationality? What country do you live in? Hobbies, are you involved in any clubs and involved in any sports that you really like? What is your sexual orientation? Your political affiliation? Languages or language? Do you speak English, French? Your occupation? What do you do for a living? What industry do you work in? Your religion, your socioeconomic class, your location, your marital status, your education. Do you have a high school degree? Do you have a college degree? Do you have a university degree? And your ethnicity. My intersectionality include that I am Guyanese from my mom's side, I am British on my dad's side, and I am Canadian first and foremost because that is where I was born and that is my nationality. I am a life partner to Gordon, and he's also Guyanese. I went to post-secondary education in Sheridan College. I went to Sheridan College for my advanced diploma, and then I also went to get my Bachelor of Human Resources degree. Therefore, I became a human resources professional. But even within being a human resources professional, I volunteer a lot with the HRPA, which is an organization for human resources professionals. I also volunteer with the Toronto Disability Pride March, and I'm a part of the executive community, as I had that lived experience, and I wanted to give back in my community, and I wanted to learn more in this space and give back and be involved and learn and get to know other people that are like me in this community. I think it's important to understand your intersectional identities, and it's important for me to understand my intersectional identities, so I know where I want to reach out to people, and I want to make connections with people, and know how I fit in this world. By knowing my own intersectional identities, I get to understand where I can make connections and where I can bring my full self to the table and where I can bring parts of myself to the table. And working, for example, when I volunteer with the HRPA, I'm connecting with other HR professionals, but I'm also bringing my experience because I'm also in the DE&I space and talking about disability, neurodiversity, accessibility, and other topics. And so I bring that to the forefront. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to highlight these. So now let's talk about you. Who are you? How does intersectionality play a role in your life? I want you to ask yourself these questions. What intersectionalities do you have? Start thinking about what identities you do have. What has been your experience with these identities? Are there any barriers that you have faced? Are you part of any communities because of your intersectional identities? What intersectionalities that you celebrate the most? Are there any that you ignore? So by understanding what intersectionalities you do have, you understand your place in the world and where you want to show up in the world. You also, when you begin to understand your experience, you understand that you've been marginalized or oppressed for any of your identities, whereas other parts of your identity would have been celebrated. For example, if you went to post-secondary education, you have your post-secondary education, but then there's other aspects that people marginalize you against. But they think it's cool that you have your post-secondary education, but you're still facing barriers to employment and other barriers. With that, so what barriers have you faced? Is it socioeconomic barriers? Is it employment barriers? Is it barriers to, getting put in these communities and, meeting other people? By understanding these, it allows you to better understand your role in the world and where you want to show up in the world, and understanding that by understanding your differences and your similarities to other people's, you begin to understand other people's similarities and differences. And at the end of the day, we all just want to connect with one another, and we all have something of value to bring to the table. And by understanding, when I was in school, I was studying human resources, but I understand that I also had more barriers to overcome than some of my classmates, and so I focused on that. It's important to understand that. And so just be you, and the world will adjust. Just by being you, you make the world a better place, and you get to connect with people, and you get to change people's lives. And in changing other people's lives, you also change your own life. Just by that one act of kindness, that one act of reaching out, you never know what the impact's going to be. And we're still in a pandemic. A lot of people are saying we're post-pandemic, but we're still very much in a pandemic. And, understanding that during the pandemic, things were hard for human connection. We're all virtual. We're literally at a virtual conference right now. But it's important to make that human connection and really understand and bring yourself to the table, understand what communities you want to be part of, and what impact ultimately do you want to leave. Do you want to, what communities do you want to impact the most? Where can you make a difference? Where do you want to make a difference? Do you even want to make a difference? Do you just want to be hanging out with your family? That's also valid. Do you want to hang out with your dog? Do you want to meet new people around the world? What do you want to do with the time you have and make that human connection with who you want to? And then compassion is a huge part of human connection. Really being compassionate for other people, even if they're like you, but even more so if they're not like you and they are different. Just showing the human compassion, and that, hey, I see that you are different from me, but that doesn't mean that I still can't treat you with equally, and that because at the end of the day, we all just want respect. And so with that, again, I quote Maya Angelou a lot, but I think it really pertains to human connection. And I've learned that people forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's at the root of human connection. When we treat people and we use our feelings and we use our emotions instead of just logic, when we emote and when we communicate, being authentic, using empathy, using kindness, all these things, we get to make a stronger human connection. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shayna Skakoon-Sparling, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Toronto Metropolitan University. Today I'm going to tell you about my work looking at the importance of social connection among gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. To begin with, let's talk about why I think it's important to look at social connection among sexual minority men. Well, from the start, cross-culturally, men tend to experience more difficulty with social connection, which leads to more feelings of loneliness. And on top of that, members of sexual minority groups, like gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men, or GBM, experience heterosexist stigma from family and peer networks. Now, these experiences of stigma can lead to minority stress, which is closely linked with difficulty forming social connections, experiencing fewer social supports, and experiencing low connectedness to peer groups and the community. This means that GBM may be particularly vulnerable to developing a sense of loneliness and isolation compared to their heterosexual peers. Now, I mentioned sexual minority stress. Let's talk a little bit about what this looks like so you can get a sense of why this is important to consider. Now, according to the sexual minority stress model, being a minority leads to increased exposure to distal stressors. These are processes that are external to the minority individual and include experiences of rejection, prejudice, and discrimination. Now, being a minority and experiencing distal stressors also increases exposure to proximal stressors. These are processes that are internal and are often the byproduct of distal stressors. Proximal stressors include things like identity concealment, trying to conceal your sexual identity in some context, or internalized bi or homonegativity, which is the experience of feeling negatively about your sexual orientation. And acceptance concern, so being concerned about being accepted for who you are in different social contexts. Now, experiencing this combination of distal stressors and proximal stressors is linked in many different research papers with negative health outcomes like poor mental health and poor physical health. But resources like social support can help with this. Supportive relationships are an important resource for coping and can have direct positive effects on health. And here I'm talking about perceived social support, which is based on our subjective impressions of the amount and quality of the support we believe we have available. Social support can help us form a sense of belonging and meaning in our lives, which facilitates coping. And social support can come in many different forms. It can include tangible, emotional, and informational support from family and friends. Having sources of social support means that you have people in your life that you can talk to when you're feeling bad, celebrate with when you're feeling happy, or turn to for advice when you aren't sure what to do. And higher social support is associated with better health outcomes for gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. We see lower rates of seroconversion among HIV-negative GBM and lower rates of depression. So in the current work, we hypothesized that we would find that perceived social support would be negatively associated with sexual risk-related behaviors and with emotional distress among our HIV-negative GBM in our sample. We also hypothesized that social support would have a buffering effect against the effects of internalized homonegativity, which is one of those proximal minority stressors. Now, the data we're going to be showing you today come from the ENGAGE study. ENGAGE is a mixed method cohort study that's being conducted in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. We used respondent-driven sampling to recruit our baseline sample of cisgender and transgender men who are at least 16 years of age and who reported having sex with another man in the past 6 months. Participants at each data collection point complete computer-assisted questionnaires in either French or English and do nurse-assisted biomedical testing. Now, the data we're going to be looking at today is our subsample of GBM who reported being HIV negative or having an unknown HIV status, and who also reported that their last sexual encounter was not with a main romantic partner. And we restricted our sample to only these guys because people often have established patterns of behavior with a main partner, and this alters their perceptions about sexual risk. So we wanted to remove this potential compound. This left me with a sample of about 1,298 guys. So let's take a look at the results. We found that higher perceived social support was associated with a variety of HIV prevention-related behaviors and outcomes among Canadian GBM. For example, we saw greater odds of seeking HIV or STI testing in the past 12 months, greater odds of engaging in behavioral HIV risk reduction strategies, a greater frequency of talking about HIV status with sex partners, and lower odds of engaging in higher risk sex. Now, we also found that higher social support was associated with lower levels of internalized homonegativity, lower levels of depression, and lower levels of anxiety. And when we took a look for that buffering effect, we found that internalized homonegativity was indeed associated with increased odds of engaging in high-risk sex in our sample. But among GBM with higher internalized homophobia, high social support was associated with a large reduction in the odds of engaging in higher risk sex. So social support seemed to successfully buffer against the effects of internalized homonegativity on the odds of engaging in higher risk sex. And we saw something similar with our anxiety and depression measures. So among GBM with low perceived social support, higher internalized homonegativity was associated with higher scores on measures of anxiety and depression. But among GBM who had higher levels of perceived social support, their anxiety and depression scores remained consistently lower, even among those with higher internalized homonegativity. So what we can see from this analysis is that social support is indeed an important resource for health and well-being. We saw direct associations with health behaviors and with mental health symptoms, and we also saw that social support mitigated against the negative impact of sexual minority stress. So this work clearly demonstrates the value of social support and the importance of social connection for both the sexual and mental health of sexual minority men. And I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the important support of our community partners, our university partners, our research partners, as well as our funding supporters. I'd also like to acknowledge the importance of our engaged study participants and our volunteers and staff. If you have questions regarding this presentation, we're about to have Q&A, so you can go ahead and ask me then. Otherwise, you can send me an email, and you can also learn more about the engaged study by visiting our website. Thank you.
Hello, Human Connection Conference. My name is Rhonda Bowman, and I'm so pleased to be speaking with you today from beautiful Macmackie, which is the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Thank you to Genwell and the Institute for Social Connection for inviting me to participate in this panel. A little bit about me. My education is in therapeutic recreation, and I've spent nearly 15 years serving seniors and adults, children, and youth with disabilities. Currently, I'm the National Community Engagement Coordinator with Recreational Respite, and I'm also a respite support worker, serving individuals and families here in Nova Scotia, Canada. Our role is to use recreation as a tool to enhance the overall health and community involvement of those we serve by addressing all the domains of health, which are intellectual, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual. So today I'm excited to share about the practice of human connection in supporting people with disabilities through the work of recreational respite, and how we have been serving people with disabilities and other barriers to participation since 2008. Recreational respite provides services in several capacities. We provide one-to-one support in home or in the community, as well as group programming, workshops, and community partnerships. We foster participation in social health with a passionate national team of nearly 150 recreational professionals who are strong advocates for inclusion and connection, and who draw from their own lived experiences with disability, mental health experience, or other vulnerabilities. We believe that the individuals we support are the voice to everything we develop and deliver in our services and programs. So we champion them in interest discovery, outcome identification, program design, delivery, and evaluation. I'd like to share a little bit more about the work we've been doing at Recreational Respite. So starting with our one-to-one services, from ages 4 to 104, people with disabilities are supported by Recreational Respite. Over the course of the pandemic, we've supported over 400 families with individualized one-to-one recreation services. We meet the individual, learn who they are, and what their desired outcomes are. We then will put together a plan of care with that person to address their goals and outcomes through recreation or play. Some examples could be that a teen is exiting high school and preparing for a transition into life as a young adult. Our team will work with that teenager to identify their needs and their skills, and then we'll use recreation programming to take steps towards independence in these areas, be it through volunteering, attending post-secondary classes, participating in leisure opportunities, or participating in a workplace. An older adult may be experiencing a stroke and has been limited in activities. The recreational respite support worker could identify that person's hopeful outcomes, such as reconnecting with the social group, independence in commuting, accessing adaptable equipment, or otherwise, and will seek ways to help them achieve those goals for optimal participation in their community. So currently we support individuals with disabilities with an average of over 2,000 hours of one-to-one support every single month, and we're growing. Our target has always been to support the individual to be successful and engaged in their community. We're also offering both in-person and virtual group programming. In-person programming has always been an important part of our work, and we started by bringing people that we served on a one-to-one basis together with others of similar ages and interests to build community connections. In April 2020, just a month into the pandemic, we launched our virtual calendars. With input from our participants, we've now developed a library of over 100 group programs. We've had over 300 participants in our virtual group programs, and we find that many who join intend to develop soft skills like team building, but they'll stay to build community and relationships, and they'll continue to attend programs like our friendship circle or escape rooms. These young people help direct and develop our programs and sometimes take the role of peer leaders. As we move past the pandemic, we're excited to be back in person, partnering with organizations across Canada to create and implement inclusive community building programming based on social health and participants' needs and interests. Additionally, during the pandemic, we delivered surveys and partnerships with other organizations, and we surveyed over 800 older adults, some who have disabilities, some who are caregivers, and we overwhelmingly found that one of the top 2 purposes for participating in recreational programs was to be social and to make friends. That's human connection. The seniors responded that they found the most benefit from accessible and inclusive programs that meet changing needs, be that their caregiving responsibilities, be that declining health or changed abilities, or even gathering restrictions. So Recreational Respite responded to the survey results by providing hybrid programming for the senior center, which was a combination of virtual and in-person programming. And the programs were selected based on their identified interests to this group throughout the pandemic. The response was that it's bringing vibrancy and buzz to the center. It's creating new avenues for the seniors to connect and engage with each other and learn new things. So in the past 2+ years, there have been a spotlight on the need for human connection, as many of us were more isolated and secluded, lonelier than we've ever been before. We heard from families and individuals with disabilities that their support systems and their opportunities for social interaction significantly shrunk. What families told us often is that they were craving connection and craving respite when so many of their supports were removed during the pandemic. The 2021 Canadian Social Connection Survey reported that the highest loneliness scores were among people with mental health challenges and people with chronic health problems and disability. It also showed that those with chronic health problems or disability were those most reported to want more social time and who perceived that they had the least social support. So many of us now resume our social lives, be it at work, in our neighborhood, or at recreation events, with a new awareness of the importance that diverse social interactions have on our daily lives and on our health. We can all better understand the isolation that so many people with barriers to participation, like disability, have often experienced when community services were not accessible to them by design. And we can now do better for them and for each other as we move forward from here. So where do we go from here? At Recreational Respite, we're continuing to grow in our delivery of one-to-one services by partnering with like-minded organizations to meet needs in an affordable, individualized, and time-sensitive way. We also have enhanced our group programming for all abilities, both virtually and in person, to nurture skill development in preparation for life's transitions and for greater community involvement. The people that we serve continue to be the voice for our program development, selection, and delivery. And in response to requests from our communities and from partner organizations, we've launched a workshop called Recreating Capacity, which is built to share the fundamentals of recreation with caregivers such as family, volunteers, professional care providers, and more. We're sharing this with organizations and care providers to offer tools and resources that will enhance skill sets and increase quality of life for individuals with disabilities and for their caregivers. It's my hope that each of you finds tangible takeaways from the Human Connection Conference and are able to find ways to make meaningful and lasting connections with people of all abilities. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much to the panelists for tremendous presentations, very rich in their diversity and in the way they take on the question that is before all of us, which is how to improve human connections. So now it's over to you, members of the audience. There's the opportunity for you to engage with our panelists. It's going to be super simple. All you need to do is write your question in the chat box. Please feel free to ask a specific question to one of the panelists or a more general question for all of the panelists, and we'll try to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak to your question. As I say, this is a Q&A period where we're going to have probably about 25 to 26, 27 minutes of exchange, and as I say, you've got 4 passionate experts from Canada, Phil from Australia, to answer some of your questions on this topic. And as you start to reflect upon what your questions may be, maybe I'll start off and ask a question. I see one question's come up here already. But I'd just like to get back to maybe Phil, if we could get Phil to talk to us, who led us off beautifully. It's interesting how you compared and contrasted And we saw a little bit of this mentioned in the chat, this idea of coming out as gay, coming out as lonely, and that it's harder to come out as lonely. There's been so many strides that have been taken to find inclusion of the LGBT community right across the world. Still tons of work to do. But what, if I may, the roadmap that the LGBTQ plus community has taken to get where it is, are there clues about how we can actually make some distance for people who are suffering, if you will, from loneliness?
Yeah, great question, James. And I think the clue there is learning from sort of the collective community history. If we think back to a not so distant past, the word gay, queer was, and a whole host of derogatory terms were seen as derogatory terms. But in reclaiming those words, a path forward and finding the power in those words, even dare I say, in those derogatory words, in claiming the ownership and the power, the way forward presented itself. And for me, that's the big clue in how to move forward in loneliness. And I find it really interesting in conversations about loneliness and in the issues around social isolation, disconnection, and the like. The word loneliness doesn't really often appear, and it really does. We seem to want to talk about the solution without wanting to sit in the problem for too long. And that goes to my point about positivity. It goes to my point about productivity and fixing the problem. But I really do feel that, in a similar way to owning words like gay and queer and empowering it, loneliness, the key to moving beyond loneliness is actually to destigmatize loneliness, is to say loneliness as often as possible. And just like coming out as gay, saying, "Hi, I'm Phil," or insert your name here, I'm lonely, I'm feeling lonely right now. There's a lot, that's a beautiful act of vulnerability and courage that actually creates the safe connective space. And until we do that, until we learn how to do that here in Australia, there in Canada, wherever we are in the world, I feel that the spectre of loneliness will loom over us unless we own it.
Yeah, so beautifully well said. Like, you're right. I don't know if people listening to this these presentations agree, but there is this, isn't there, this huge stigma attached to being lonely, unpopular, disregarded, excluded. Dare we admit that? And I think what you're saying is like, let's admit that. Let's dare, let's be brave and admit that. Frankly, how do you disentangle your own loneliness if you don't actually admit it? In fact, it's the snake eating its own tail. Like you end up being in a worse position by refusing that moment. So let's leave that. Thank you so much. Already learning a lot from this panel. Kiffer has posted a number of questions. Really good. From your presentations, it seems various key populations experience common, albeit intersectionally unique, barriers to social inclusion. You're right. This is not the key population panel. This is the key populations panel. This is about a number of different key populations that are experiencing this very, very difficult type of challenge. His first question is, I wonder, how might the facilitators of inclusion and connection be similar or different within and across groups? So let's maybe talk about the similarity between the populations and how to mediate between a present that is difficult and a future that is better. I'm wondering, Sydney, you're our intersectional expert.
Yes.
This seems to me just like a lob ball for you to kind of take on. Maybe you could lead us off with your reflections on that.
Yeah, based on that question, really understanding where the similarities are and like what y'all towards like you said, facilitators of inclusion, and so they obviously want to include everyone and make sure everyone feels included, and that's the main thing why they're facilitating that conversation. But they might be facilitating people with disabilities, like Rhonda, for example, or facilitating in the workplace, and but having that common ground of wanting to change the world and have that more inclusion. And then also understanding how to make everyone feel included, and understanding their own barriers and their own intersectional identities. It's like, hey, I'm an inclusion facilitator, but I'm also a Black man or, a white woman, and really understanding that they're all agents of change and just working towards that common goal.
Nice. Agents of change. And identifying yourself as such. Beautiful. I'm wondering if either Shayna, I'm not sure if Shayna's joined us yet. Shayna was going to potentially be late to the Q&A. Shayna, yes, welcome. Great to see you.
Hello.
Welcome to the conversation. I wonder if you'd like to take a stab at first question.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this after Kiffer posted it, so I was glad to have a little bit of time to reflect on this, because I think that so like the population I'm working with is sexual minority men, but the facilitators for inclusion and connection are not necessarily unique for this population. Like everybody needs to feel that they have their need for belonging met, and that can be met through peer networks and through family. And so yes, for the population I work with, there are like key areas related to sexual orientation identity where these kinds of things can break down. But I think that this is where things like family of choice become really important. And this family of choice is important for not just for sexual and gender minority groups, but for a lot of people. I am really close with a lot of my friends, closer with my friends than I am with people I'm genetically or by law related to. And so I think this family of choice pieces can be so important for facilitating connection, facilitating inclusion. But I mean, it takes a little bit more work to maintain and to find your family of choice, because people you're blood related to or related to by law, there's almost like these like social obligations, like you're supposed to get together for like these major holidays, but with your family of choice, maybe you have to make a little more and not just you, the individual, but the whole group has to make more of an effort to get together. And I feel like I very maybe answered this question, maybe not, maybe just said some things.
Well, what I heard is that a common strategy, maybe that's the wrong word, to addressing that sense of social exclusion, whatever your key population group is that you need the equivalent of a family and people that you can rely upon and trust. And whatever those shapes may be different depending upon the key population itself, but the fact that you need that circle is perhaps horizontal across the population group. So I love families of choice. It is such an important and beautiful idea in and of itself. We all have them, and I think we need more of them. And actually putting that word to it is or that expression to it, I think is terrific. Okay, Rhonda, do you want to weigh in on this first part of Kiffer's question as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so interested to hear the last perspective there, because just reflecting on my own family, we have a few gay men in our family, and they experienced, when they first came out many years ago, they experienced some people who did shut the door on them and chose not to be involved with them anymore, and they had to make their own family, just like you said there, Shayna. And similarly, I think that people with disabilities, once people in their families or people in their extended friends are aware that they have a disability, it is harder for those connections sometimes, and it takes maybe more work in some cases from one person or the other. So really understanding the
the humanity of us all, and that we're all really the same on the inside, and we all need that connection. And being, as Sydney said, a change maker and reaching out to others at all times. I just want to echo what they said in regards to that. So
fantastic. Yeah. I'm just reflecting as well as you're talking that it is a loneliness, and overcoming it is different in kind from acknowledging, as Phil told us off the top, oh, you're gay, amazing, fantastic to be brave to come out and say that. There's no actual obligation following that other than the acknowledgement of the fact of that person's sexual orientation. Whereas to acknowledge someone as being lonely and saying, you're lonely, is to potentially embed subsequent obligations upon us. I'm wondering, and just for all of us to reflect upon, if one of the great barriers that all key population groups will experience is the fact that they, to overcome and be included, requires others coming to them who may be reluctant to do so in informing that family of choice is easier said than done. Anyway, that's just for people's reflection. Kiffer's second question is also a really interesting one, and then we'll move on to some of the other questions below. But what population-specific and general population programming can help address barriers and allow social connection? So this is kind of the other side. So maybe we'll circle back around to Phil. Is with respect to the gay community, is there specific strategies that would be relevant for that key population group? And please feel free to broaden your answer to other key population groups that you may want to speak about as well.
Yeah, James, great question, and Kiffer, another fantastic question. It's very early in the morning for me to be dealing with such big matters, but I'm here for it. Really, the key word there is accessibility. One of the things that I'm going to call it's a frustration of mine, is that conversations about loneliness tend to happen at a public policy or at an academic level. And this is really, I mean, it's great. However, it's not accessible to people who really are feeling loneliness as a kind of an emotion that is really hard to define. And so it's about how do we have the language of loneliness that allows people allows humans, however they identify as humans, to see themselves in the description of what they're feeling and make that accessible beyond academic conversations or public policy discourse, and really bring it from the brain into the heart. And there's an awful lot of tools that we can use to do that. And it's partly using social media for good, because that's where we are. When we feel disconnected, lonely, we tend to reach for our phones first. So, let's be there as a way of intervening and helping people take concrete steps to then get the real connection beyond their phones.
So the social media as the jump off point, I think, and maybe we'll bring back in Sydney here, but exactly the opposite is possible as well. I think so much of today's spike in loneliness, I think some would argue, and I'd love to hear what panelists think about that, are due to the fact of being excluded from some of those social media platforms, feeling like there's so much more going on that I'm not part of, that I'm just going to withdraw even further. And it's not actually a jumping off point, but it's in fact it's a disincentive to moving out of the space you're in. But what about you, Sydney? What are your thoughts on this idea that maybe specific strategies are absolutely crucial? Social media maybe being one in current forms or other forms for key population groups.
Yeah, so my perspectives is like in the workplace, right? And so understanding what strategies need to be done in the workplace, especially because we're working remotely right now, like I kind of touched on them in my presentation, what strategies need to be implemented. So, how to increase that employee morale and that camaraderie and that teamwork, especially when you work from home all the time and you're doing everything from home, that's a huge aspect of isolation during the pandemic. And, we're still in a pandemic and people are still working remotely. So, leveraging different tools, but also, things are slowly opening back up and things are back open. Can you, do an outdoor event and then also have a hybrid? And I think a huge strategy moving forward is going to be a hybrid model for people with disabilities and other people and individuals, having that because sometimes it's more accessible to be from home. And, some people want to meet in person. So, really understanding how can we make the profits reach and make the most impact and connect with the most people. And so, just looking at your strategies and just really saying, okay, let's try this strategy and trying, not being afraid to try new strategies. I think a lot of times people think they have to pick one strategy and that's it, but I think you realize that you have to constantly look at new strategies. And it's like, okay, it worked for this one event, the hybrid model of the different strategies, it might not work for the next time, and just being open to constantly changing and evolving.
Nice. Workplace virtual. Maybe there's different roads to the castle, depending upon the person.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing as well trial and error. Like
yes,
a really interesting comment as well. That and that's sometimes super hard for lonely people. Super hard. Rejection sometimes is just means backwards.
Yeah. When you rejected, but it's like just keep trying, and reaching out, and you never know what's gonna stick. So just keep.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Sydney. Thanks for those. All of our pistons are firing here. I'm going to jump down to William's got a really interesting question. I think it's a good segue here, and maybe I'll tee up Shayna for this one. But it's about the sense of the individual's self-knowledge of or self-recognition is the term he uses of loneliness. I'm wondering. It's interesting because you're working on perceived loneliness is so integral to the results that you found. Is that an issue in play in and of itself? Is the sense or degree of self-knowledge about that condition that you may be suffering from or not?
I think that is, when I was scrolling through the questions and I saw William's question, I was like, oh, I'm so glad somebody asked this, because that's something that I think about all the time. Like I've got 2 research studies, one that's running and one that I'm still setting up, trying to explore loneliness a little bit more. But for the first study that we're currently running, we actually don't call it a loneliness study because we weren't sure who would sign up for the study, partly because of the stigma, but partly because exactly what William's kind of asking about here, like do people who are lonely always realize that they're lonely? And I think some people do, and I think some people definitely don't, especially with the population that I'm working with the sexual minority men. I think that this looking for fun, looking for excitement, wanting to be around other people, it is a scary thing to frame that to yourself as, oh, I'm lonely, instead of like, oh, I feel like going out, I just want to be around other people tonight, I want to have a drink, with other people. But really this lack of social connection, these feelings of loneliness, this can lead to drinking too much, or agreeing to hook up with somebody who you might otherwise maybe not agree to hook up with, or agreeing to engage in behavior that you're like, oh, I'm not sure I actually want to do this, but I really want to feel connected to a person. And so instead of being like, oh, I'm lonely, I should, instead of being like, oh, I'm lonely, I should look for ways to be less lonely. Instead, you're kind of not self-diagnosing correctly. And so you're treating the symptoms of your loneliness instead of treating the causes of your loneliness. And I mean, we know this, and now I'm taking a very medical model, but like from medical models, when we only treat symptoms, you don't always deal with a real issue.
Yeah, and so that is a it's a huge piece of an important piece of I think reflection for all of us, is that if the very individuals, if you will, that we're targeting to try to reverse a decline in terms of social inclusion are themselves not able to acknowledge, aren't aware that what is causing whatever symptoms they may be suffering is loneliness. We've got a really big challenge, even before the one Phil identified about being brave and coming out and saying it. What if they don't even know it? And there's parallels, of course, in mental illness of a whole variety of kinds as well. What do I have? Why do I feel this way? Why am I not the person I want to be? And not being able to put your finger on it is something I think very, very important, if you will, from so many perspectives, both at the service level, the clinical level, at the policy level as well. So thank you, Shayna, brilliant. And now, Rhonda, just a question about this whole issue of health, and that it seems, and thank you so much for actually mentioning the fantastic Human Connection Survey results, where we did see that feelings of loneliness are a spike in those with chronic illnesses, mental health and physical health as well. But I'm just wondering, you talked about the craving of connection for groups in general who are suffering from, individuals, groups that are suffering from this sense of disconnection. But what about people with those chronic those chronic health problems? What are the additional barriers to them across this spectrum, in self-recognition, in being that bravery to come out, and then in actually doing something about it in terms of creating families of choice or otherwise? I'm wondering if you might comment on that.
You froze a little bit during your question there, so I might not have caught it all, but I'll speak to it, and if I miss anything, please just let me know. So, first of all, there's so many different layers of human connection that we may interact with on a regular basis. You might have your casual interactions with your neighbors, you might have your workplace interactions if you're working in person or working remotely. They're going to be very different things, right? And you might have other relationships with your friends, relationships with your families. And then you're going to have those healthy relationships and those ones that aren't so healthy for you. So it's extremely layered, and if you're missing a piece of that, it starts to sort of degrade how you feel about your social health, right? How you feel if you're connected enough to the folks around you. So that's really one aspect of it. When we're talking about barriers for folks who have disabilities or mental health experiences or other types of barriers, there's so many, and I mentioned it in my video that we have our physical domain of health, our social domain of health, our intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, and really those are very interconnected. When you're not socially connecting in a way that is filling your cup up, you're also going to notice that your physical health isn't quite where it should be. Maybe you're missing an opportunity to exercise with a friend, or maybe you're not in that workplace environment and getting that intellectual stimulation that you might get every day, or that sort of casual social stimulation that you might get every day. So I can't possibly talk about all of the barriers in just a couple of minutes, but you're so right that those are there. And then when you add that intersectionality piece, as Sydney mentioned, it just makes it more complicated for folks. So we have to look at the individuals. We have to talk to the people who are lonely, and bring it forward. And I can say that I've experienced loneliness many times in my life, and it's the people around me that bring me back to my full version of myself.
Amazing. It is. We are such a social group, such a social animal. Like we are defined such a great extent by the people we interact with, the way they perceive us, or the way we think they perceive us. It is just how we're built, right? So, folks, we've come to the end of the panel. On your behalf, please let me thank our four fabulous panelists. I can't sincerely thank you enough for your contributions here today, and all the work you're doing in this space, and you will continue to do in this space. I'd just like to say as well, from my perch, working on the front lines in the homelessness sector, that I see every day, as you do, people who are out on the streets so often by themselves, so often with their hand out, asking for a contribution money, an orange, a granola bar. What they're actually asking for, I think maybe it's been your experience as well, is human connection. And we have a chance right there to acknowledge fellow human beings who have, rightly or wrongly, been so profoundly excluded that they found themselves without a home. And so, if I may, if we all do nothing else over the course of the next little while from this conference, let's be the agents of change. Let's be maybe small members or a member of somebody's family of choice, so that they might have a chance to become their full person, or take a step towards that just by saying hello to someone in the street, actually braving going up to them and saying, how you doing today? And maybe the next day doing the same thing. And all of a sudden they have status again. They've been recognized again. And that is in some cases a profound difference in their day, and may lead to really good things. So connect everyone, engage everyone, and thank you so much for being part of the Human Connection Conference. All the best.